Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us at the annual meeting of the Home Construction Regulatory Authority, the Hcra for short. I'm Tess Lynn, the Director of Communications and Stakeholder Relations at the Hcra, and I will be the moderator for today's meeting. It's my pleasure to welcome you. I would like to begin our meeting by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands we are on today. While we meet on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we all call home. We thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. The Hcra is committed to meaningful engagement with our stakeholders. This includes home builders and vendors, consumers, and of course, the general public. Today's annual meeting is a great opportunity for the Hcra to provide an update to our stakeholders. As a provincial regulator, our stakeholders are located around the province, and as such, virtual meetings offer more accessibility to those across Ontario, including those who may not be able to travel or struggle to attend in-person events due to COVID-19 related health concerns. However, we do look forward to hosting in-person meetings and events in the near future. Following the formal portion of the annual meeting, we will move into a live question and answer period. I will provide more instruction on this after the formal portion concludes. So many of you may already know at least a little bit about the Hcra, but let me give you a quick summary of our role. In brief, as of February 1st, 2021, the Hcra is responsible for regulating and licensing the people and companies who build and sell homes in Ontario. The Hcra is a not-for-profit corporation that is designated by the provincial government to administer and enforce the New Home Construction Licensing Act 2017 and associated regulations. The Ministry of Public and Business Service Delivery retains responsibility for the legislation and oversight of the Hcra. The Hcra also ensures consistency across the sector, deterring unethical and illegal builders and ensuring a fair marketplace. In addition to licensing, the Hcra provides educational information for consumers on their home buying journey. We also host the Ontario Builder Directory, which provides background information about each of Ontario's more than 6,000 builders and vendors. So that's a little bit of background on the Hcra. To lead us through the formal part of this meeting, I invite Virginia West, Chair of the Board, and also the Chair of the Annual Meeting of Members, to officially call this meeting to order. Over to you, Virginia.
Thank you, Tess, and good morning to you all. It has been my pleasure to serve as the Chair of the Hcra Board, overseeing preparation for the organization's launch in February of last year, and through this, its first full year of operation. I'd like to first introduce the Hcra's Board of Directors. Marg Rappold, Vice Chair of the Board and an elected Director. Eric Denouden, an elected Director. Rinku Deswal, appointed by the Minister. And I should say that Rinku is unfortunately unable to attend the meeting today, but has asked me to express her support for the resolutions to be voted on by the members today. Hugh Herron, an elected Director. Mary Cardis Burton, an elected Director and Chair of the Governance, People and Culture Committee. Av Maharaj, an elected Director and Chair of the Finance Audit and Risk Committee. David Stemak, appointed by the Minister, and Terence Young, appointed by the Minister. The directors of the Hcra are the members of the corporation and the persons who are entitled to speak to and vote on the resolutions being presented today as part of our annual general meeting. Sandra Gibney, Corporate Secretary, will act as Secretary for this meeting. Proper notice of the meeting has been given and a quorum of members is present. It is my pleasure to call this annual meeting of members to order. This meeting is also open to the public, and we welcome everyone who has joined us this morning. And I want to express my deep appreciation to the other members of the board, the Hcra staff, and the many stakeholders who support this vital organization, including, of course, Minister Khalid Rashid and the Ministry of Public and Business Service Delivery. Our first item of business is the approval of the agenda for this meeting and approval of the minutes of last year's annual meeting. The agenda and the minutes were distributed to members with the notice of meeting. May I have a motion to approve agenda and minutes? I want to thank Mark Rappel for moving and Mary Curtis Burton for seconding the motion. All members, please vote by a show of hands. I declare the motion carried. Thank you. It is now my pleasure to introduce a special guest on video. The Honorable Khalid Rashid is Ontario's Minister of Public and Business Service Delivery, which is the ministry to whom the HCR reports. Minister Rashid is the first to hold this title, appointed to the newly named ministry shortly after the recent provincial election. In that election, Minister Rashid was re-elected as the MPP for Mississauga East Cooksville, where he has been MPP since 2018. In his first term, he served as Deputy Government Whip and was then assigned to the brand new role of Associate Minister of Digital Government in the Ministry of Finance. This past June, he was appointed to the Cabinet as Minister of Public Business Service Delivery, and we are delighted to welcome him on video this morning.
Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to greet you as Minister of Public and Business Service Delivery. It is an honor and a privilege to work for the people of Ontario in this capacity, and a responsibility that I take seriously. The Home Construction Regulatory Authority has accomplished a lot in a short period, and for this, I commend you all. As you know, our government recently made legislative amendments that tackle the issue of unethical behavior by vendors and enhance your organization's enforcement powers. By equipping you with more tools to hold new home builders and vendors to account, our government is keeping consumers better protected. As the government continues to explore ways to address housing issues across the province, your organization will play an important role in enforcing requirements for builders and vendors of new homes. And because the new home sector is one of Ontario's greatest economic drivers, it is vital that we get this right. Together, I know we can continue to build a bright and prosperous future for our great province and for the people who call it home. I thank you for the opportunity to be part of your annual meeting of members, and I wish you all a productive and successful discussion.
Thank you, Minister Rashid, for these kind and encouraging words. We do appreciate the time that you spent with us today. I know you have a very busy schedule, and hope that in future years you'll be able to join us in person. We are encouraged by your words, and we share your commitment to the mandate that we have. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the Chair's report, which I'm happy to provide. In the only 19 months since its official launch, the Home Construction Regulatory Authority has firmly established itself as a proficient, responsible regulator of Ontario's home building sector. I want to thank the HCRA staff for their dedication, determination, and courage in getting the organization off to such a great start. There have been some challenges, to be sure, as the Hcra took on a brand new role as the licensing body for a very large industry. The Hcra team has worked diligently to identify and correct concerns, develop innovations, and create a strong foundation for the future. A few months into the operation, we were delighted to announce the appointment of Wendy Moore as the Hcra's CEO and registrar. Alongside the senior leadership team, Wendy has skillfully led the Hcra through many firsts. Wendy will provide you with specific accomplishments and milestones in a few minutes, but on behalf of the board, I want to commend her and her management team, along with all Hcra staff, for a job well done, at times in very challenging circumstances. The reviews have been largely positive, as most of our stakeholders welcome the Hcra and its work. Builders and vendors appreciate the need for high professional standards and a level playing field curtailing illegal and unethical competition. Consumers know we are on their side, giving them helpful direction and listening when they feel something has gone wrong. I also want to acknowledge the support we've received from our stakeholders and partners, to the builders, vendors, consumer advocates, individual new home buyers, provincial government representatives, municipalities, realtors, and many others who intersect with new home construction. Thank you for your thoughtful, productive advice and ideas. We are in a new era of home building industry oversight. The board is proud of what the HCRA has accomplished to date and confident about many more successes in the future. Thank you for helping us get here, and we look forward to working with all of you and for you in the years ahead. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Wendy Moore, who was appointed as the CEO and Registrar of the HCRA effective April 5, 2021. Wendy has over 20 years of experience in the licensing and regulation of professionals, legislation and policy development, construction, housing, and consumer protection. Before joining the HCRA, she was Vice President and Registrar, Licensing and Consumer Services for BC Housing. We are delighted that she is leading the HCRA, and it is my pleasure to introduce her for the CEO's report.
Thank you, Virginia, and for the kind words, and good morning, everyone. The HCRA is committed to openness and accountability, and we appreciate you taking the time to join us this morning to hear about what we have been doing and our ongoing role in Ontario's home building sector. So the HCRA has been in operation for more than a year and a half now. It has been a productive time. As Virginia mentioned, yes, there have been some growing pains as expected. Despite all of the preparation, there were some issues that could not have been anticipated until the HCRA was in operation. We continue to diligently work through those issues, and I hope you share our confidence that the new system is starting to work as anticipated and continuing to get even better. It was an incredible year of many firsts. Together, our team and stakeholders have achieved many milestones. We've recently published our 2021-22 annual report, which is available on our website, so I encourage you to go look at that if you haven't already. And let me share some highlights from the report. In our first full year, the HCRA received 7,760 license applications and renewals. The industry is bigger than ever, which underscores the need for the HCRA. We established an Industry Advisory Council and a Consumer Advisory Council, both of which we meet with regularly, giving us vital input and ideas on our services and initiatives. Communications has also been a major thrust of our early operations. To raise awareness of what we do and answer questions stakeholders might have, we have held 5 webinars and virtual events attended by more than 4,200 participants. We created an e-newsletter subscription system, encouraging stakeholders to sign up, and so far have sent out 16 updates, reaching more than 58,000 recipients. We launched a blog called The Homefront, offering insights and advice on the home building sector. Again, I encourage you to check out this material on our website. We are active on social media, regularly posting updates, reminders, and tips, attracting nearly 1,000 new followers in the first year. Another major milestone in our first year was the implementation of a formal code of ethics. The code of ethics was implemented by the Government of Ontario on July 1st of 2021. It sets out clear standards of conduct that Ontario's licensed home builders and vendors must meet. It's particularly exciting for us because having a code of ethics is a first in Canada as part of the regulation of the home building industry. We issue advisories on a regular basis to explain how the HCRA will interpret the code of ethics and to outline our conduct expectations for licensees. Most recently, this included an advisory regarding price escalations and project cancellations, an issue getting increasing attention. The advisory is to ensure builders and vendors understand their responsibilities and expectations from the HCRA when dealing with price renegotiations, cancellations, and that they are treating purchasers fairly and with honesty and integrity. The HCRA has implemented a new complaint system to deal with complaints concerning licensee conduct and complaints about unlicensed builders and vendors. More than 800 complaints were received in the past fiscal year. Not every complaint warrants intervention, of course, but this new process has served notice that builders and vendors will be held accountable for their conduct. Fortunately, most of Ontario's builders and vendors adhere to the Hcra standards. The few who don't may face tough consequences. Conduct complaints against licensees may result in progressive discipline, anywhere from a warning to full license revocation. We may also refer an alleged code of ethics breach to the discipline committee, who may mandate education or levy fines. Complaints against unlicensed builders or vendors for failing to enroll a new home in warranty or for otherwise committing an offense under the applicable legislation may result in charges leading to convictions. During the first year of operation, the Hcra dealt with a range of serious complaints, which resulted in both charges being laid and proposals to revoke licenses. In addition to educating our licensees of their conduct and ethical obligations, we are also implementing education programs to stakeholders who interact closely with consumers, particularly real estate and legal professionals. We strongly believe that this inclusive and collaborative approach will provide enhanced consumer protection and awareness while building consumer confidence in the home building industry. The Hcra prides itself on providing resources for consumers as they take the first step in making arguably the biggest purchase of their lives. A helpful resource for consumers is the Ontario Builder Directory, a searchable database with background information on licensed home builders and vendors in the province. It also includes information on builders who are not licensed, whom you should never buy from. During the first year of operations the public searched the directory more than 31,000 times per month. We want to continue to raise awareness and improve the directory for consumers. That's why we added new information to the Builder Directory in the first year, including charges laid, licensing conditions, and also compliance orders. As part of our ongoing commitment to bring data and resources to new home buyers, we're also launching a public consultation on the Builder Directory. In fact, the Ontario Builder Directory survey just launched this week. Following up on work we did with a survey, we did some work with focus groups earlier in the year, and now the survey is available. So I encourage you to go onto the website and participate in that. The results of this consultation will assist the Hcra to understand how the Ontario Builder Directory can service consumers even better through clarifying existing information or providing additional information that will be relevant during the new home buying process. We encourage and welcome your feedback and participation. The Hcra looks forward to ongoing dialogue on how we can improve our resources, and will continue to take a collaborative approach in engaging with consumers, members of the public, industry, and other stakeholders to inform enhanced consumer protection. And speaking of the future, let me close by offering a few thoughts on what lies ahead. We continue to build towards a steady state, transitioning from startup through our first year into a stable, consistent, efficient operation for coming years. To help us get there, we have developed a 3-year strategic plan to guide the organization through an ever-changing regulatory environment. Our 3 key goals are to deliver an enhanced service excellence with the best people and systems, to operate a financially sustainable regulatory model that supports the comprehensive and proactive accomplishment of our mandate, and to forecast and act on current and emerging issues affecting new homebuyers and builder qualifications through leading research and education. I want to reiterate that the Hcra is committed to ongoing engagement with all stakeholders. We will continue to enhance our educational materials, our outreach to stakeholders, and we've begun rolling out our public awareness campaigns across digital platforms and radio. We want to continue to be a regulator that establishes the right priorities, identifies and addresses the real risks, are accountable for our actions, and above all else, builds confidence and trust, both in the Hcra and the home building sector it oversees. Thank you, and I look forward to answering your questions you may have during the question and answer session.
Thank you, Wendy. We have completed our financial year ending March 31, 2022. Members receive the financial statements and the auditor's report thereon with the agenda and material for the meeting. Av Maharaj, Chair of the HCRA's Finance, Audit, and Risk Committee, will provide the financial highlights. Over to you, Av.
Thanks a lot, Virginia. I am pleased to report on the financial statements for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2022. Now, I want people to keep in mind that this is the first full year of operations for the Hcra that began operations on February 1st, 2021. Now, as a regulatory authority, the Hcra's principal objective is to manage revenues, expenses, and net assets in a manner that allows the organization to fulfill its vision of fostering a professional new home building industry that Ontarians can trust and meet its obligations to the government, the public, and other stakeholders. Now, the operating revenues for the fiscal year were derived primarily from funding for new licensing and renewal fees, the per unit oversight fees. Together, these fees accounted for almost 90% of the total revenue of $17,287,000, $287,000. The Hcra has a number of agreements with the Terrion Warranty Corporation, the predecessor to our organization for oversight, and the associated with the initial startup of the Hcra, which made up an additional $1.5 million. These revenues are not expected to recur on a continuing basis. Expenses increased slightly over the previous year to $9.5 million, primarily due to increased staffing costs as the Hcra continued to recruit to full staffing levels required to operate on an ongoing basis. The excess of revenue over expenses is $7.76 million, driven by higher revenues for the fiscal and prudent management of expenses by Hcra. As I mentioned, this was largely due to expenses being not as high as anticipated during the initial startup phase of the organization, as well as conservative assumptions on new home starts and the need to build up an operating reserve fund for Hcra. KPMG, who are the auditors of Hcra, have confirmed the financial statements presented fairly in all material respects, and the financial position of Hcra and the result of the Hcra's operation and cash flows for the year ended March 31st, 2022. Virginia?
Thank you, Av. I'm looking to the members to see if there's any discussion on the financials or the auditor's report. Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the resolution to reappoint the firm of KPMG LLP as auditor of Hcra until the close of the next annual meeting of members? Stimac moves the motion. Terrence Young seconds the motion. Thank you very much. All members, please vote by show of hands. I declare the motion carried. Thank you. Thanks again, Av. The annual report, which includes the financial statements, is posted on our website, and we are pleased we're able to share this snapshot of what has been quite the year for the Hcra. The next item of business is the election of directors. The directors serve on a those elected directors serve on a 3-year term. And so the resolution before the members today is to elect Mary Curtis Burton and Av Maharaj to serve 3-year terms as directors of the corporation. May I have a motion to approve the resolution? Hugh Heron, thank you, moves the motion, and Eric Denuden seconds the motion. All members, please vote by a show of hands. Thank you very much, and welcome Mary and Av to another 3-year term. This is the business of the agenda for today's annual meeting, and so at this point in time, I declare the annual meeting of members to be adjourned. But we will now move to the public question and answer session, and I'll pass it over to Teslyn to introduce that.
Thank you, Virginia. So the formal part of the meeting has concluded, and now we would like to open up the discussion and head into our question and answer period, for which we've allotted 30 minutes. If you would like to ask a question live, please select the Ask a Question Live button. You will be redirected to a separate Zoom window. Once there, please use the Raise Your Hand function to enter the queue. When I call on you, based on the order of the queue, you'll be able to turn on your camera and microphone to ask your question. While you have the ability to appear on camera, it's not required if you do not wish to do so. Once you've been redirected to the Q&A Zoom window, please close the livecast.live webpage. This will prevent any audio feedback and sound disturbances you may experience. Don't worry, you'll be able to view and hear the meeting while you are in the queue. Hcra staff will be monitoring the queue in the Q&A Zoom room and will provide further instruction. Alternatively, you may send in your question in writing by using the chat box or emailing your question to annualmeeting@hcraontario.ca. Please note that the chat box will automatically forward your question to the annualmeeting@hcraontario.ca inbox, so you do not also need to send the same question to the email address. As you ask your question, a few points to keep in mind. This is not an appropriate forum to discuss individual cases, so please keep your questions to that of a general nature, as we will not be able to comment or provide updates on specific ongoing matters. To keep the segment moving, please only ask one question at a time with no follow-ups. I would also ask that you keep your questions brief, respecting others who are also waiting in the queue. We will try to take as many questions as we can on a first-come, first-served basis. Thank you in advance for your cooperation. Now let's open the virtual floor to questions. And so I see we do have a few questions, so I'm going to go to some of the written questions first. And the first one that I see is, why has there been 0 discipline hearings and very few regulatory decisions since the Hcra began operations?
Okay. Thanks, Tess, and thank you very much for the question. And I think it's obvious that we'll ask the CEO and registrar to respond to that. Wendy.
Thanks, Virginia. Thanks, Tess, and thank you for the question. There have been several regulatory decisions made since doors open. In fact, we can make decisions on a license anywhere from warnings on a license mandating education and further training, conditional licenses, suspensions and revocations of licenses, and also we can refer a matter to a discipline committee, which can also mandate education and levy fines. So if you're interested in seeing what we have actually done during the year, you can go to the page on the Hcra website, Regulatory Activities and Enforcement, and see what we've done there. The question specifically, I think, about the discipline committee, as I understand it, is so the discipline committee was created as a result of the Code of Ethics coming into being on July 1st, 2021. So the 800 complaints that were mentioned earlier on during our first fiscal year, many of those complaints we wouldn't have been able to send to the discipline committee, because really up till the end of the calendar year 2021, most of the complaints were about behavior that started prior to the Code of Ethics being in place. Since then, we have certainly been focusing on high priority complaints, some of which may be appropriate for the discipline committee. The discipline committee is actually, although it's a body of the Hcra, it's separate from the registrar's office. So the discipline committee can be referred complaints. The registrar's office actually has to do a full review of the complaints and know that we have a good case before we send something to discipline. But we have one in front of the discipline committee right now. And if you're interested in that, you can also go onto the website and look at the regulatory activities and enforcement page under discipline committee. You'll be able to see details of that referral, which is not resolved yet, but you can certainly see that. And we anticipate referring more complaints to the discipline committee, particularly ones that we want the public to be aware of the nature of those types of complaints. There was a real game changer that happened this year on July 1st when the government increased the amounts of the fines that the discipline committee can levy, including taking into consideration any profit that a developer or a builder may have made as a result of their behavior. So I think we're going to see some really interesting results out of that committee in the future. I also wanted to mention, though, that of course, when it comes to dealing with complaints, we deal with it on a risk-based. We look at the highest risk complaints first, and we certainly have some results coming out of that, as I had mentioned. The worst thing that you can do is take somebody's livelihood away. That is the most serious thing you can do. And just a couple of weeks ago, we issued a proposal to revoke 6 licenses and add conditions to 3 more licenses of a developer who we have been working on a complaint for several months regarding price escalations and condo cancellations. So we're encouraged to be able to move forward on some of those complaints. You'll see more of those in the future. And I think it's a real, it's really good communication to the industry that our licensees do need to act with honesty and integrity, or there will be consequences. Thank you, Tess.
So the second question that I have received is a question about the Ontario Builder Directory, actually. And so the question is the Hcra responsible for the accuracy of the Builder Directory, or is Tarion? And also, how can Hcra verify that the information that it's provided by Tarion is accurate? And what are the consequences if the information is found to be incorrect?
Thanks, Tess, and thanks for the question. Certainly, as Wendy commented in her original comments during the annual meeting, the OBD is an important tool for all of us and for protection of consumers. So there has been, the board is aware of, has been a lot of work undertaken since the Hcra has become responsible for the OBD, and but a very good specific question, and Wendy, over to you.
Yes, thank you for the question. It's actually an excellent question, and I think it really goes to the distinction between the Hcra and Tarion. Tarion, as we all know, is responsible for the warranty program, and Hcra is now responsible for the regulation of the builders. And these are 2 distinct roles. And I think what we see in the Ontario Builder Directory is a bringing together of the data and the information that is collected by both of those organizations. So certainly the Hcra hosts the Ontario Builder Directory. We are fully responsible for all information regarding licensing decisions, those enforcement decisions I spoke about earlier. But we also host the information about warranty service for builders. But that information is provided by Tarion. Tarion is responsible for the accuracy of that information. I think it makes sense that both Tarion and the Hcra are working in the same field. I suppose there could have been a separate directory for Tarion's information and one for the Hcra. I think that would not have served consumers very well. It's great that the consumers have sort of a one-stop shop to go and look at information about their builders, whether it's licensing decisions or their warranty service. But certainly, I had mentioned the survey about the OBD. So we're very interested to hear how that's working for you, what sort of information you think could be added, what might need to be clarified. If you have comments about the accuracy, we're certainly willing to hear that. And we'll be sharing all of the information that comes out of that survey and the consultation in generally, both with Tarion and with the ministry.
So maybe just as a follow-up, Wendy, and you just referenced it in your last comment, if it's brought to our attention that there's some concern about accuracy of information that's been provided to us by Tarion, we will sort of take that on and consult with Tarion or forward it to Tarion. So at least that there's a connection there, and we try to assure that everything we're aware of is accurate. And
we certainly share any information that we have like concerns about, complaints about the information with Tarion, for them to deal with. Some of the information, of course, is around, whether or not a defect is warrantable. That's really in Tarion's bailiwick to determine that. There's a licensing appeal tribunal process for that. And, sometimes they will make adjustments to the data and send that back over to the OBD.
Thank you, Wendy. So we're going to go back to another live question, but as I understand, Barbara has left the chat, so maybe she'll come back. So we'll go to the next person in the queue, which is Nina. So Nina, you're live on the line with us, and I just want to remind again, if you have the livecast.live window open at this point, you should close that window to avoid any of the sound disturbances.
I'm here.
Nina.
Yes, I'm here.
Perfect.
I have a question. On page 18 of the Hcra's annual report, it says the principal objective is to manage these net assets. The question I have is the Hcra's principal objective consumer protection, or is it asset management?
It's an interesting question. Absolutely, our primary mandate is consumer protection, but to carry that out, we have to make sure that we have an organization that's properly funded and resourced, and that we carry on our fiduciary responsibility with respect to that. So, Wendy, I don't know the specific reference to the annual report, but
I think that might be a reference within the audit, perhaps, and I think Glenn might be able to, our Chief Administrative Officer might be able to provide some context on that, since I don't know which page you're referencing specifically. Glenn, are you available to speak to that?
unmuting yourself, maybe?
I think, as Virginia said, of course, it's not managing assets is not our primary objective. But in terms of our fiscal management, it certainly is. I think it's within that context. I don't know if anything else needs to be said, but Glenn, I see you're off lead now.
It's absolutely, Wendy. It's in the context of the audit that we had with KPMG and matching the revenue and our expenses and making sure that they are managed in the context in a fiscally prudent manner, and that is the context of that comment on page 18.
Thanks, Glenn. Hopefully that answers the question from Nina.
Thank you, Nina.
Thank you. And so to keep it moving, I will go to the next question that we've received. And the question reads, how can you prove to consumers that you handle complaints fairly? Where is the transparency you can show to consumers?
No, that's an interesting question. When we deal with complaints, of course, there's a balance between what we do provide publicly, what we're allowed to provide publicly, and what we do not. But typically, when there has been a decision, particularly a serious decision in terms of say a proposal to revoke a license, or a referral to the discipline committee, all of that information is actually public. So for example, if you go to that page that I'd referred to before, regulatory activities and enforcement on our website, you'll actually see a summary document that shows what decisions we're making, and it provides the reasons for making those decisions. There are some decisions that we make more on the sort of lower risk level, such as warning letters, and some training, mandatory training decisions, unless they're made a condition of license, in which case they would be public, that we do not make public, and that is regulated by legislation. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Wendy. And so we're going to go back to a live question, and I believe Barbara is back on the line with us. And I'll just remind you and everybody else who is in the queue to ask a live question to close that live cast.live window. And Barbara, go ahead with your question.
Yes, I'd like to ask, why are there no consumer advocates on the Hcra board?
Okay, thanks, Barbara. And I'm so glad that you were able to get back in the line there. It shows that technology can be our friend, but it can be frustrating as well. So thanks very much for the question. Just to remind you, or sort of to advise you, the Hcra board has 9 members, 6 of whom are elected, as you saw some of the election earlier on, and 3 that are appointed by the minister. And we do look for board members who have experience in the regulatory space, the new home building sector, and those who've held or have experience in consumer protection. Within both of the administrative agreement that we sign with the ministry, as well as in our bylaws, we address this quite directly, because we do want to have a balance of perspective, and in particular, Barbara, we do want to make sure that we have a consumer voice. And so just with respect to the membership of industry, the bylaw does require that there be at least 1 member coming from the industry, but no more than 3, and you will see in our board that that is the case. The balance of perspective that we are seeking includes those who've had experience with regulatory responsibilities, because that is the business of the organization, and obviously the oversight responsibility of the board itself. I'll say that I see that we have 2 members specifically who have experience in and are passionate consumer advocates. It may not be in the field of home building, but it is in other areas that helps to inform us. Rinko Deswal, who wasn't able to join us today, she is a lawyer with over 18 years of litigation experience, and she has represented consumers who have had concerns with respect to home builders. She does carefully sort of recuse herself, so she doesn't have a conflict of interest with respect to any of her specific files these days, but she does have that background. And in fact, she herself personally has had that experience. And so she does bring that particular experience and perspective, lens of the industry to the board in its deliberations. And Terrence Young, who's here with us today, has experience in consumer advocacy, has been very successful, including the promotion of important consumer protection legislation at the federal level during his time as member of parliament. And I think that is very helpful insight to bring to our board and our responsibility. And I also want to remind you that we do have the Consumer Advisory Council that brings important perspective as well, that meets 4 times a year, that is consulted, and that we had the chair of the CAC, Jay Jackson, from the Consumer Council of Canada, come to the board as well and report out, and will be doing so on an annual basis. So I think we do have a very good balance on the board, and I think it includes some important perspective of consumer protection and experience. But thanks for the question, Barbara.
Thank you, Virginia. So we'll go to our next question, which is, what services does the Hcra provide to new home builders and vendors for the licensing fee it charges?
Oh, that sounds like a question for me.
Yes, it does. It sounds like a softball. I hope it's not.
Yeah, certainly for the licensing fee that we charge, and Our main source of revenue is actually through those licensing fees and the per unit oversight. What we are providing is, of course, the processing of the licenses. That's kind of like the application part of it, the administrative part, but also that oversight and regulation of the industry generally. So when we're dealing with conduct complaints, when we're dealing with illegal builders and vendors, all of which take significant resources, not only are we protecting consumers, but we are also, in a way, protecting the industry. We were helping laying a level playing field for the industry. And of course, one of our main objectives is that consumers have a good experience with the industry, and that we're raising the bar of professionalism for the industry through our work. One of the things that's in our strategic plan as well, which I'm very excited about, is the idea of creating a research and education function. Of course, we do have the education function already, and as Tess had mentioned before, we've done webinars and seminars, both for consumers and our licensee members. But we really think that once we get the research program, which will also deal with, construction-related research, technical issues, issues that are becoming more and more important in the industry, that's going to be an excellent service for our licensees as well.
Thank you, Wendy. And with that, we will go to our next live question, whom I believe, Greg, you're on the line with us. And again, just a reminder to everyone, do close that livecast.live window so that there's no audio feedback. Go ahead, Greg, with your question.
I think Greg might be having some audio trouble here, but he did put his question into the chat box in here. And Greg's question is, what impact does the HCRA have on a builder's day-to-day work?
Greg, good question. Again, Wendy, I'll ask you to respond.
Thank you, Greg. So it might be a little bit similar to the previous question, but I think sort of further to expand a little bit more on that, I think some of the things that we have been doing lately regarding the code of ethics and the competency requirements. So one of the services that we do provide is the advisories that I mentioned before, advisories and directives, which can help builders navigate the code of ethics and understand what our perspectives are at the Hcra and our expectations. So I think that conduct, business practices that may have been common or okay in the past for some builders, not all builders, I think by really paying attention to those advisories and paying attention to some of the actions that we're taking in response to complaints, it certainly could impact the day-to-day business of builders. So they may have to adjust how they do business. And I think that our response to those price escalations and condo cancellations and our work around that is a really good example of that. The industry is definitely paying attention, and those who thought they could maybe take a fast and loose approach to increasing contracts have been told, no, you do need to honor your contracts. You do need to treat consumers with fairness and honesty. So I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Wendy. And actually, this ties into the next question, which is, why do you allow builders to raise new home prices after contracts have been signed?
Well, I suppose the answer to that is if it's not in the contract originally, then we don't support that, and we're not okay with that. There are certain clauses, of course, within these contracts that do allow some closing costs, such as municipal fees, utility fees, that sort of thing. There might even be clauses in the contract to deal with certain price increases. And of course, if there are changes to a contract in terms of new services being provided that weren't initially contemplated by the contract, those would be okay. But in general, we expect that builders will adhere to the contract. There really is no allowance in the addendum to the contracts. It's mandatory for all agreements of purchase and sale to cancel contracts because of price increases on the builder side. So the answer is that we don't. And some of our recent actions and our advisory communicate that position.
Thank you, Wendy. And we'll go to the next person in line for the live question.
Page 10 of your annual report, could you confirm who are complaints the Hcra submitted to? Do I submit a complaint about the Hcra to the Hcra?
So there is a protocol with respect to concerns about the Hcra itself, and just detail that for us, Wendy.
Yes, that's right, Virginia. Thank you, and thank you, Nina, for your question. Yes, if you have concerns about the Hcra, our services, something that has happened, part of our process, you can submit the complaint to the Hcra. We have a complaints officer that deals with those. The complaints officer will work with me on a resolution and whatever department it might be that the complaint's about. If the complaint is about me personally, then the complaints officer will work with our chair to investigate the complaint and determine a resolution. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Wendy. And I'm just looking at the clock. We'll probably have time for one or two more questions. And so I'm going to move on swiftly, which is the next question I see in the queue is, who can builders contact at the Hcra to ask questions about legislation or learn about upcoming education and webinar opportunities?
Well, actually, that would be you, Tess. So Tess is our director of communications and stakeholder relations, and Tess and her team are actually responsible for that. But really, for any questions that come to the Hcra, we do have a central inbox, info@hcraontario.ca. So you can send any questions you have to that inbox, and we'll make sure that they are routed to the appropriate folks, whatever the question might be.
Thank you, Wendy. So the next question I see that we have is, does the Hcra plan to take retroactive action against builders who have unethically renegotiated prices with purchasers before the new Code of Ethics was published?
That is an excellent question. If the action happened before the Code of Ethics was published, we do have some tools at our disposal. They're not quite the same. So for instance, we would not be able to refer a matter to the discipline committee. But even before we had the Code of Ethics, there's still, the legislation did still expect that our licensees conduct their business with honesty and integrity. So it's not really retroactive. It just means that depending on when the actual conduct occurred, we might have different tools at our disposal.
Thank you, Wendy. And I think we have time for one last question. And the one that I see to come in is, how is the Hcra enhancing consumer confidence in the Ontario home building industry?
Again, I'll let you handle that one, Wendy. A very wide open question. I think lots of is happening.
It is a very wide open question, and I think there is a lot going on. I think the As far as confidence in the home building industry, our activities cover a lot of things. So we've got, we have, of course, we talk a lot about the complaints today. We also have the licensing process, which is a robust licensing process. We expect that our licensees are going to be competent in a number of areas, that they will be financially competent, and that they're adhering to legislation. So we have the complaints, we have the competency through licensing, we have our investigations of illegal building and vendors, and of course then we have our education program. So really providing information to consumers about their rights and what services there are available, and also providing those services to builders so that they can be the best that they can be, and also increase that confidence in the home building industry.
Thanks so much, Wendy. And that looks like that's all the time we have in terms of the Q&A segment today. So if we didn't get to your question, we'll respond to everyone's question in writing. Or if you want to discuss something further, please feel free to contact us directly by email. Again, the annual meeting at hcraontario.ca is there for you for any questions. But I want to take the time to thank everyone this morning for joining us at today's annual meeting. And we hope you found it informative, and we look forward to engaging with you in the future. Have a great day.